Om Shri Sai Ram, offering my most humble and loving salutations at the lotus feet of our beloved Lord, Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. With great gratitude and humble salutations, we again continue this blessed opportunity to share Sai Ram Katha with all of you. Please join us with the prayer and we start the program for the evening. O Lord, take my love and let it flow in fullness of devotion to Thee. O Lord, take my hands and let them work incessantly for Thee. O Lord, take my soul and let it be merged in one with Thee. O Lord, take my mind and thoughts and let them be in tune with Thee. O Lord, take my everything and let me be an instrument to work for Thee. Om Shri Sai Ram. Om Shri Sai Ram. Bringing Sai Ram Katha to all of you has been a great joy. I remember in my childhood, I heard people say that when Ramayana is recited in anywhere, it brings and bestows peace and prosperity all around. And this venture of ours to bring Sai Ram Katha has certainly given us certain experiences, certain exposures, and a great sense of fulfillment. And we are humbled by the love and affection of everybody who has been part of this journey with us. So let me welcome my brother Ranganath Raju. Sai Ram Raju,
Sai Ram, brother. Sai Ram.
and this has been Raju. I was just sharing that this has been a wonderful experience to really dwell deep into the life of an avatar and you know to explore the life of Sai Avatar too in parallel with Ram to understand the at least to get a glimpse of how an avatar works and what all he has done to all of us and to get a better appreciation of this beautiful birth which we have got today. What do you think?
Absolutely, brother. I think Swami says in one of the discourses that uh, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, these three happen simultaneously when you talk about the avataric sojourn on earth. And he says when you implement the actions that are done by avatar, the next three would automatically happen. So this is a sadhana, and I personally feel I do not know about what the viewers feel, but for me, this is an opportunity to think about Swami and his glories and the beauty of his various forms.
Certainly. As Bhagwan also explains, and we keep looking at it again and again, that just by dwelling into the life of God and godly people, we learn so many lessons. And in a way, all the Vedic texts, all the spiritual texts of the world can be understood and lived through learning about these lives of Avatar and Avataric people. So let us jump into this as we are looking at so far. This journey has been amazing, and I want to take this journey forward. So far, Raju, what we have discussed, and I would like the audience to join us in the flow of it. We look at Ram Katha. We have seen the philosophy behind the Advent. We looked at how Bhagwan explains the purpose of Avatar, the why, the environment behind Avatar, and how this avataric life or lives should be understood not from a mere physical story of a king or a prince or anybody, but from a learning perspective of a journey of Atma, journey of a soul which is on the way to the mergence with the supreme consciousness. So that philosophy was very beautifully brought out by Bhagavan as the behind the story of Avatar, and we are making a humble attempt to share behind the scenes stories of whatever Bhagavan has allowed us to get the glimpse of. And then we looked at, whenever Raju I look at Avataric life, I always see it is not, only the negative factors, because usually we always believe that yada yada dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. So whenever we understand it as a decline of dharma, which is the cause of an avatarhood, and here I find Bhagavan explaining that that is happening not as a primary reason. My coming does all of that, but my primary reason is also to make my devotees happy, to give them the joy. So the people who are good, people who are following the dharmic life, they have a pleasant opportunity to experience and enjoy that beauty of avatar. So the first was the facilitators of Advent, and we looked at the lineage, we looked at all the people who were involved in creating a positive environment for the Lord. And the last, we look at also now that there are equally negative powers who are required for an Advent. And Ravan beautifully represented that negativity of Treta Yuga. And today we can have a correlation later on to understand how every that Ravan element has gone in all of us. But that time, if at all negativity needs to be personified, it was done as Ravan. So he was that another beautiful or a wonderful magnanimous cause which facilitated the avatar of Ram. Raju,
Absolutely,
please
brother.
share your thoughts.
Absolutely. In fact, if we go through Ramakatha Rasavahini, the flow of Swami's writing, other day when we were discussing, in fact, I was thrilled when I realized that there is nothing that is unthoughtful by the Lord. Everything that he does has a deep significance. If you look at the flow of Ramakatha Rasavahini, this is exactly, in fact, we have actually taken it from Swami that he follows the first chapter deals with the philosophy of Sri Ramachandra, the greatness of Rama and his name. Then the second chapter deals with the entire lineage. Essentially, he is establishing the credibility of the avatar as to all the great lives that have preceded for getting such an divine form onto the earth. In that, he also mentions the various saints and sages that have been pining for the avatar to be in a physical form. And then, interestingly, the third chapter begins to dwell about Ravana. So, if you take, as Swami in one of the discourses, he talks beautifully about this. If you take a balance, on one side you have the Dusta Shikshana, and the other side you have Shishta Rakshana, the punishing the bad or annihilating the bad and protecting the good. And Avatar comes as a balance, and that he says that uh, medium, that straw which indicates as to whether which side is heavier, that he says is the dharma. So Ramakatha is written in such a way, it not only if we, I remember in one of the conversations, one of our teachers told me that one day a great sannyasi had come to Parthi, and Swami was talking about Krishna, and this sannyasi was thrilled. His eyes were moist. He was kind of emotional, saying how beautifully Swami has spoken. And next to him, he was this teacher of ours was a student then. He was sitting next to this great yogi, the sannyasi, And he looked at the sannyasi and he wondered. All that Swami spoke about was how Krishna stole the butter from Gopikas. That was all that discourse that went about. So this boy was wonderstruck. He was asking the sannyasi, Maharaj, what is it that was so profound in this? All that Swami said was that how Krishna stole the butter. And sannyasi gave a beautiful explanation to this brother of ours. He says, Karshate iti Krishna, Kurshate iti Krishna. To the one who is in difficulties, Krishna means the one who redeems you of all difficulties. To the one who is lost in the attractions of the world, Krishna means he is the one who pulls the magnet that pulls you away from the world. And to the one who is lost in in the joys of the Lord, in the devotion, he is the one who delights you infinitely. Says this explanation is what Swami is giving you through those simple anecdotes. This boy was thrilled. When he told me this story, the brother of ours also added that how much we receive from Swami is actually dependent on our maturity. If you look at Ramakatha Rasavahini, if you read it as a story, yes, it remains as a story. But if you meditate on the way in which Swami wrote, so many insights pop up. I mean, those were jewels that the Lord has packed it. Swami says that a king wanted to test a minister, uh, the minister's acumen, so he packs many jewels in a very seemingly ordinary cloth and gives the minister. The minister looks at him and says, King, you are so intelligent that I know the reason why you gave me this. He said, one is to make sure that I am intelligent, to test my intelligence, and another is it is also to ensure that unnecessary attention is not drawn to these jewels. Only the worthy will know what is there in this package. So that worth is our sadhana, I think. The deeper you are into sadhana, the greater are the insights that we see from the Lord's writing.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Okay, let's continue this further. And now let us explore this beautiful life of Ravan. But before we go into exploration of Ravan, I'd like to tell you a little bit of backdrop on which how Ravan is introduced by Bhagwan. And it's very interesting that there is a story behind all of this. There are a lot of calculations they do that when Ravan was born, he was born somewhere in the middle of Satyug, or end of Satyug, kind of middle of Satyug. And Dashrath happened at the end of Satyug. And there is almost what they calculated around 58, as we mentioned, generations between Ravan and Sri Ram. So when they calculate in the whole way, there are many ways of they have calculated people, and it says 28,088. So roughly around 28 lakh years old was Ravan when Ram encounters him. And this is the beauty of the age, how they lived through those ages. And Dashrath was supposed to be around 60,000 years or 66,000, that's what they say, around when Ram was born. Now, there is a very beautiful story about how this encounter happens. We all know that there was a king called Raghu in Raghukul who was very righteous and who was very renowned for giving beautiful rule to the kingdom. People are very happy because everybody followed Dharma. So Raja Raghu rose to such an height that people started quoting him as an example of Dharma. If anybody could follow Dharma like Raghu, was supposed to be the excellent, the best one. And that is where that verse has come. Raghukula Rita Sada Chaliyai, Prana Jai Par Vachanan Na Jai. That is the trend which Raghu started, is that once word is given, then even at the cost of life, the word should be kept, uphold. So that was Raghu. His son was Aja. Aja was another great king, and his glory was so high that he was actually ruling all the three worlds, and he had a lot of influence over everybody. So he was a great king in his own right. But unfortunately, there was an incident that his wife was a damsel. She was an apsara, and she had cursed. So she was born as human, and then there was a liberation format that if a flower from Narad's feet would fall on her, she would get liberated, and that's what happens one day. And Aja loses interest in life after that, and he hands over the kingdom to his very young son, that is Dashrath, and he fasts to death. He takes that vratam of Nirjala vratam and he fasts to death. And Dashrath, yeah, I'm sure you can explain that better. Dashrath was very young, a small boy at that time. So his gurus take care of the kingdom. And that is what we discussed when we were talking about ashram avastha, that how these Brahmins, these intellectuals, they were so selfless, and they actually ruled the kingdom through the kings. And when the king was not available, they even played their roles without taking any credit. So, in the name of Dashrath, they ruled for so many years till Dashrath grew up, and he was amazing. And what they say about his caliber is amazing, that he had that versatility and the capability of 10 charioteers together. He was so amazing in the war front that nobody could stand against him. He had mastered the art of war and other things so beautifully. He was, in fact, capable of fighting for devatas. So, can you imagine today we are even struggling to find an aeroplane to go to moon, and there he would carry the whole army and go to heavens and fight for devatas. So it was actually a space war in those days, which Dasharatha was master of. So Dasharatha's fame increased greatly, and this fame Ravan heard, and Ravan got jealous. Ravan seemingly appeared that, hey, somebody who has become more prominent and powerful than me. And what Ravan does in his arrogance, he sends an envoy to Dashrath and conveys that, hey, Dashrath, and the envoy says to Dashrath in his court, he says, hey, Dashrath, I am the messenger from the great, great emperor named Ravana. I am here to ask you to accept Ravana as your commander, as your king, as your master, and pay your obeisance. And now onwards, you must pay a kind of rent to Ravan. And Dashrath starts laughing, listening to it. And Bhagwan very beautifully explained that, he laughs like as if a father is laughing for a kid. What a, the mischief, the innocence of a kid. And he picks up the bow and arrow from that place, Dashrath, and shoots few arrows towards Lanka. And he locks up the entrance, is the main entrance of Lanka. And he tells the messenger, he says to him, Doot, go back. I have already given the first installment to your king. So you can go. And he releases the messenger to go back. Messenger goes back to Lanka, and he finds that, that all the doors are locked. So he somehow reaches the palace and he tells the king, Ravan, about the whole thing, what had happened. And Ravan sends the whole contingent to open the doors, but they fail. And Ravan's pride is crushed. Ravan is totally devastated that, my God, somebody can shoot an arrow from Ayodhya and lock him in his palace. And the moment Ravan accepts the defeat within himself, the arrows return back, unlocking the doors of Lanka. So that was the caliber of Dasharath. But this does not, Ravan being that Rakshasa element in him, he can't take this experience in a positive manner. And Ravan gets little personal about it. And he goes and he realizes that humanly it is not possible to fight this great man called Dashrath. So he goes and does penance for a few thousand years. That time, the 1,000 years seems to be like a cake in the park, in a walk in the park. So everybody has to. So he goes and does penance, and he pleases Brahma. The Lord Brahma appears and he says, Ravan, I'm very pleased with you. Ask. your desire. And Ravan says, I'm humiliated by Dasharath. He was so much humiliated. He said, and I can't, imagine if Dasharath is so strong and powerful, how will his children be? So I pray to you, O Brahma, that let Dasharath not have any sons. Let his progeny not grow. And Swami writes, Bhagavan writes it so sweetly that Brahma says Tathastu and disappears before Ravan. He thinks that if I stay for a little longer also, Ravan may add to his request more. So he says Tathastu and he disappears from there. And Ravan is happy in his pride. But his fear is not over. So he's sure that okay, after Dashrath, at least there is nobody from Dashrath who will take care. But as we look at it, Ravan was also a great astrologer. He was he knew astrology and other sciences. So he got to know about that Dashrath is going to get married to Kausalya, the princess of Kaushala. So he wants to kill her. He says, if she's not alive, then Dashrath can't marry, and Dashrath will not have a son, obviously. So now that story, right, Raju, I would like you to tell people. That will be another
Yes, brother. In
interesting.
fact, just to add, before our man sets also on that penance, he realizes that Narada instigates him that Dasharatha, Kausalya's progeny would cause the death of Ravana. Now he is a
Ravan.
bit scared. He's a bit worried that one side he has Dasharatha and other side he already Narada, the great sage, tells him that this lady will be the cause of his destruction.
So he wants to now destroy even Kaushalya. Raju, you got paused. I hope you can hear me. I'm sorry. I think Raju brother has got. Uh, so what happened actually was that Ravan gets to know about it from Narad that Kaushalya is also the cause of his death, and so he wants to kill her. She was a young girl at that time, and Ravan manages to kidnap her. And after kidnapping, he puts her. Actually, she faints, and he puts her in a wooden box, and he throws her into the ocean and let her float. But as the destiny would have it, that box arrives through the Saryu River at the banks of Ayodhya. Yes, Raju, please take on from there.
Yeah, apologies. There is some problem with my internet connection in Parthi.
No problem, please carry on.
So, yes, as you said, the box finds its way to Dasharatha. It is a mortal, fatal combination for Ravana. The lady who prophesies to be the mother of the progeny who would kill Ravana ends up being the wife of Dasharatha. So, the story doesn't end there. Swami uses that instance to show as to what sterling character was of Dasharatha. So, when Dasharatha, it was Sumantra who finds that box, and he calls Dasharatha, and when they open, they see a beautiful lady. Dasharatha does not take her. He he wakes her up and then he inquires as to where she is from. And when he learns that she is the daughter of the king Kausala, he takes her and hands her over to the father. Father was so impressed with his dharmic behavior that he gives his daughter in marriage, and the minister's daughter comes as the wife to Sumanta. That's how the king and the minister get married, and thus the fatal knot for for Ravana was tied by Dasratha. In fact, in one of the Kodai discourses, Swami says, Kodaikanal sessions, Swami tells that when God wills, there is nothing that you can do. He says, the destiny, God willed that Ravana has to die. Ravana had so many options. In fact, in the Kodai session, I remember Swami was saying that people were the ministers of Ravana when they learn about the dangers from this lady Kausalya, they tell him, they suggest him that kill her, finish her off, or poison her, or you just kidnap her. But somehow he goes on with the mindset that he would finish her. He stealthily enters into the garden, and there he finds Kausalya playing with a flower. And that scene changes Ravana's mind. He thinks, why should I kill such an innocent lady? And instead of killing her, he kind of packs her up in the box. And Swami says that is how the mind takes a turn when the divine will happen. You cannot cross the line that is drawn by divine minds. And he gives the example of Ravana in this instance as to how he became a puppet in the hands of fate, that he ended up as the cause of his own death by giving Kausalya to Dashratha in marriage.
Raju, you have brought in a very important element, and I would like to bring in this perspective for everybody that on one hand, we look at a character like Ravan, who was like all said and done 100, 200,000 years old, or he has lived through a yuga. I don't want to put a number to the age now. So, and he has lot of things under his belt as achievement. And then we see him falling prey to certain sensual gratification, which leads to the whole story of his death and all that. Now, look at a person who has lived through such a long journey and contributed immensely to the growth and development of eons. And we look at that portion to understand what Ravan was. It's a very interesting fact to look at it to even understand that Ramayana cannot be understood only from a physical eyes. And I would like to really present this, and I would like you to join me there to present this thought to everybody that whenever we look at Ramayana, Bhagwan always says to us that Ramayana must be looked at from a perspective of Atma Ramayana. And to understand Ramayana, we must have Sukshma Buddhi. I would
Yes,
like you to tell this, Raju, because Swami has, Bhagwan has been very particular about this Sukshma Buddhi part, even with
absolutely,
students
brother.
on many occasions. So if you want to give a little bit of introduction to that Sukshma part.
Now, he's in one of the interactions I remember, Swami very clearly says that Sukshma Buddhi, or the ability to read the intentions of the Lord. It is not the actions of the Lord, but the intentions. That is, it's a blessing. It's an act of grace given by the divine, depending on the depth of your sadhana. So I remember on one occasion, Swami was giving discourse, and Swami was, you know the way in which Swami stands when he delivers the discourse. He puts his two hands on the table, and he speaks eloquently. Now, at a physical level, when Swami is standing like that, sometimes the hands would go numb at a very physical level, because he has been in that single posture. And sometimes Swami's, Swami would find the physical body would find a bit difficulty of the numb, because of the numbness in the legs also. So there was this brother of ours. He was 2 years senior to me. He was sitting in the front line, and Swami was putting those two hands, and he was speaking for quite long. And now the discourse is coming to an end, and Swami has to start the bhajan. Premamurta Manseko. And we know the style in which Swami pushes the mic with his left hand, and then he starts clapping Premamurta Man. Now, for clapping, Swami is finding it difficult at a physical level, because his hand has kind of turned numb. It is also a play that is put up by the Lord so that we learn the lessons. And Swami is looking at the hand now. For everyone else, Swami is just giving discourse, and Swami is, through his looks, he's blessing the devotees. But this brother who was sitting in the first line, he understood. He got up, and as Swami was finishing, he offered the rose. It was a very unusual act. In between a discourse, you don't expect someone to reach up to Swami. But this brother offered a rose. In the pretext of offering the rose, so he held Swami's fingers and pressed. And it kind of released that numbness. Swami gave a beautiful smile, gentle, beautiful smile. And then Swami blessed him thoroughly. And then Swami started Prema Murta Mansako, bhajan started. Not a word was spoken between them. But when this boy came and sat, for the next 2 years, Swami kept him so close physically that Swami blessed him profusely with, with tremendous opportunities. And then Swami, one day, he said, one day, he reveals to this brother in Kodai, he said, that Sukshma Buddhi, that point when your senses opened up to realize as to what the Lord wanted, that is when you won this grace. And but Swami also reflects the same thing in Ramayana. If you look at the way in which Swami, he's a great teacher. He does not teach directly, but he inspires. It is up to our intellect, Shraddha, as to what we find in Ramayana. When Lakshmana comes out, and sorry, when Rama comes out, when the Shurpanaka was throwing a tantrums, Rama does not tell Lakshmana that cut her nose, cut her ears. Swami beautifully says Rama just shows up the sky and down earth. And our man realizes Lakshmana that sky means Shruti, which means ears, and this Shruti is smell, and he just chops off her ears and nose. That Sukshma Buddhi is, I think, essential component for understanding the actions of the Lord and the flow of the Avataric journey. That applies even to Ramayana. If you look at Ramayana, as you're saying, at a very physical level, like the Ramayana versus Atma Ramayana, or Samanya Buddhi versus Sukshma Buddhi, the minute we start looking at Ramayana through the prism of devotion, to the prism of a refined intellect, we start seeing that everything is actually a play of divine. In fact, in the previous episode, you just previous discussion minutes ago, you're mentioning about as to how Ravana being a great astrologer. But we should pause and think: why is it that such he being such a great astrologer, why would he be such a fool to pack up Kausalya in a casket? Was he playing his role to the perfection? Why was he going against the advice of all the ministers? This entity who lived for 20 lakh years, and this Rama was what, 30, 35 years, when the recent research says as per the 34, 35 years, 34, 35 years, the blip in that massive flow of time. And why did Rama, I mean, why did Ravana allow himself to fall prey to that fire of Rama? These are things that we should contemplate deeply.
I think this is a point we should keep in mind as we move
Yes,
forward to exploring Ravan's life, because that would give us a better understanding of who this character Ravan is and was. And as we say rightly, that to play a negative role in the play of the avatar, the negativity must also be of that superior quality
absolutely.
to match the caliber of avatar. Ordinary negativity can't touch. So you have to be of that caliber of Ravan to play the role, negative role, So as we have in our movies, an actor playing a negative role. So he's not a negative person, but he plays a negative role. And this is what, character like Ravan, Hekai, if you look at it, Bali, they played a negative role, but they were not a negative person per se. But Ravan had a wonderful and multifaceted personality. So I would like, let us all explore this together to see what Ravan was and how he contributed to the whole journey of humankind. So Ravan, let us start with the name Ravan. The Ravan has a meaning called one who roars or screams, and we all know that Vaishravana was uh, his another brother, who was known as Kuber, he was the step brother of Ravana. The father had two marriages, two wives, and from the second wife, she was the actually Vaishara was the the rishi, son of Pulastya, who was a Manasputra of Brahma. Vaisharva and Kekai was the mother of Ravana. Kekasi was a we can call it Rakshasi or demoness. She belonged to the Rakshasa clan. Vaisharva's first wife was Ilavila. She was a damsel. She was what should I say, Raju? She was from like Sattva
The
side.
clan
So
of Devatas.
Devatas. She was a clan of Devatas, yes. And her child was Kuber. So that is how Ravan and Kuber were brothers. Kuber's original name was Vaishravana. That means one who can hear distinctively. Vaishravana. And that Ravan, when he was born, it seems his cry was so loud and ferocious, even the mother got scared. And Ravan's normal ability to talk was very loud, and he would create fear in people through his volume and voice, and that is why his name Ravana was befitting to him. And that is how Ravan, when he was born, the father gave him the name of Ravan, who was opposite of Vaishravan, and that was Kuber. And interestingly, for just GK for everybody, Ravan was born in Uttar Pradesh in India, UP, as we know, and it's a small village called Bisark. Bisark was actually the place from where Vaisharva came, the father, and that is where he was born. And later on, when he grew up, he goes and captures Lanka, which was the city of Kuber. His brother had prepared that city, and is a very uh, prosperous city. And Ravan takes it over, and he kicks him out. So that is how he moves from UP to Lanka. So that was a small introduction of Ravan's birth and name. Raju.
Yes, yes, brother. In fact, in one of the discussions, Swami talks beautifully about this lesson of nature. Swami says the qualities of worshipping the Lord, of doing penance, immense penance, of determination, of devotion, of steadfastness. He acquires it from his father. You can actually split Ravan into two halves if it is possible. And it's very clear that the aspects of devotion, dedication, discipline, devotion come from his father, while the quality to usurp anything that he likes comes from his rakshasic nature of the mother. And Swami says that in the Chandogya Upanishad, it's very clearly given the definition of Rakshasa. They're not the ones with horns and ugly teeth. That is a pictorial, it's a poetic depiction. But Chandogya Upanishad, Prajapati clearly defines the one who emphasizes on the importance of the body alone is a Rakshasa. So this lady was a beauty freak. I mean, she would go to any extent to keep herself beautiful. Uh, Ravan's mother, Kaikasi, at one point she compares herself even with Parvati. So that Rakshasic nature of Kaikasi, that extreme jealous, and that jealousy, that greed, that lust comes from mother, and those two combine to form this great personage called Ravana. And in fact, it is, as you mentioned about that city Kuber, Lanka. uh, One of the darshan sessions, one boy was he was called by Swami for distributing prasadam. As you recollect, Swami would just come and talk. Swami would just come outside the interview and just show four like this or three. So it's a sign that how many boys should come go inside and get the prasadam. So one of those were the days when some of the boys were getting some particular set of boys because of their education course. They were getting good amount of attention from Swami. So these four brothers, Swami showed like this, and these four only ran inside. Now what happened was when these four went inside, that space in the darshan block was empty. So as these brothers went in, they took a bit longer than the usual time to come out. Now we know the attraction of the Lord, and it's that empty space in Kulwant Hall is more tempting than anything because you get to sit in the first line. So boys waited for 1 minute, 2 minutes, and third minute they thought now it is too late, so they just usurped the space and they sat off in that area which the brothers vacated. Uh, 5 minutes later, the brothers come out with those basins, and behind them, Swami comes. Now these brothers come, and as they were supposed to be distributing sweets, so they come and they look at the space. Then they can't express, they can't openly say that you sat in my place because Swami is right behind them. So he's giving that angry look and saying, "Go back." And this brother who is taking prasad, he says, "I will not go back." After this beautiful interaction, Swami was observing, and then Swami made this comment. That's how I'm getting this comment. He tells one of the teachers, "Hey, this is like Ravana going and taking away Lanka. Ravana, Ravana goes as a Brahmin, as a pujari. His brother invites Kubera invites Ravana as a pujari for the inauguration of Lanka, and our man goes in as a pujari, as a Brahmin to officiate the rituals. He goes, he tells Kubera that you have to go on a ritual of doing some pradakshina for having such a golden city. He sends him out and then he usurps that place. He just takes away the place. Now, when this man comes, because of Ramana's might, he kind of shoos him away, throws him away. In the same spree, he also takes away his flight, the plane that Kubera had. And Swami says, I think there were only two planes of that time. One was with Kubera and other was with Indra. This was
That's
our
so
man
sweet.
Ravana.
That is, we have also heard that it seems when Ravan was born, obviously the father Vaishnava knew, they were all foreseers and they could see through the life of everybody. So he understood that Ravan has the Rakshasi tendencies because of the mother. And he tries to initiate him in all the scriptural knowledge, hoping that probably that would influence his upbringing and may help in changing the attitude of Ravan. Raju, here I would like you to also share the backdrop story of Ravan. When they were the gatekeepers of Narayan and they were cursed to take the birth.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
That
at that time, they chose shorter life than a longer life. Please tell that story. So
yes,
that
brother. In
will give a
fact,
glimpse to the people. Yeah.
yeah, the seven Sanat Kumara, Sanat Sananda, the seven sages when they were trying to enter, this Jaya Vijaya stopped them, and because they do not have explicit appointment of Vishnu, they say that you cannot get in because of the whatever the Lord Vishnu is busy. So and that enrages the sages because they had green pass to get in and get out whenever they want. And it is also again here Swami when he talks about this, Swami beautifully refers in that discourse. He talks about that sukshma buddhi. It was that punishment actually. The punishment was not for not letting them in. These are sages. They are extremely wise people, but it is a lesson to each one of us. When you are not attentive, when you are not attentive to the needs of the Lord, you get thrown away. Swami had that famous interaction with Radhakrishna sir, where uh, he was holding a glass of water, and then Swami calls him Radhakrishna. So all that this brother did was he just put that tumbler on the table and he rushes to Swami. And Swami looks at him and says, I called you that time. Appud pilchan nenu. I called you then. All that took was one second. If you're not attentive to the Lord, you lose the opportunity. And that same thing happened to these Jaya and Vijaya, the gatekeepers. It is not that the sages were enraged because they stopped them. No, no. It is that Samanya Buddhi, if you look. But they realized that they were not attentive to the needs of the what is the need of the Lord? That anyone with that devotion, when he walks in, you should be the medium to allow them to reach the Lord. Now here they are actually become the obstacle because of their inattention, and that is what get cursed. and now they go and plead the Lord that Lord, we don't want to be away from you. Then Vishnu gives them an opportunity to be 7 lives away, being good lives, or 3 lives being bad, but they can come back quickly. And that's how our people choose the 3 lives, in which the first one was Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, second one was Ravana and Kumbhakarna,
Kumbhakarna.
and third was Kamsa and Shishupala.
Yeah. See, the important, I've realized this, Raju, in Bhagwan's life also, that we watch certain students who are very close to Bhagwan in initial years. You find when you listen to their stories, you realize that Bhagwan was very strict under those environment, those situations, to an extent that a small deviation of a boy would lead expulsion of the boy. And then came a time when we saw a very gross, deviations and no reaction from Swami. So as an older brother, I was when I look at the situation, I used to wonder like, has Swami really becomes that soft and has allowed the deviations to happen? Because we could not dare to stand up in front of Bhagwan, just for an example. Even though the freedom, the luxury was there, but there was a very different maryada around Bhagwan. And my seniors, I've seen them, as you're talking about that understanding which Lakshmana showed to Ram. I have seen that with our seniors, our brothers who were with Bhagwan. Like Swami doesn't have to tell them, they would know exactly what Bhagwan wanted. Can you imagine, in a general example which I can share with devotees who have been observing Bhagwan? Bhagwan is sitting on a chair, on high up on a stage, and the boys are quite far down below and singing bhajans and all that. How many people know as a devotees that Bhagwan would convey from there on the chair which boy he wants to next sing the next bhajan and which bhajan that boy must sing? And if he wants to interject the bhajan and make somebody speak, he can even say that from the stage. And nobody will understand except the boy and Swami. So only the student faculty will know that, okay, Bhagavan wants this way. And without shaking, the arrangements will happen. Mics would be shifted, the boy would get prepared, everything will happen. But for the audience, it is very difficult to even guess that there was a communication between Bhagwan and the students. And as you were mentioning, it just became, I was visualizing that scene when Bhagwan from the chair would point out certain things, even crack some jokes. And we were not supposed to laugh also because of the decorum. And the whole thing will go on, and nobody would even know that this is Swami who has asked us to do that. He would tell something and then disappear. And you have to understand what he expects. So, this Sukshu Buddhi part, I think it is one of the uh, maybe a tools or training modules of Avatar. So those who are remaining close to him, they are expected to learn that. And if you can't keep it up, then obviously you will be pushed back because it's not God doing that, but it is our ability to remain close to the fire determines how close we can get to it. So he is that pure, blemishless spark, and to go near him, you have to be ready to be burnt and get merged in him. And when you see that interaction, you realize how subtle and critical that relationship is. So when we look at from an samanya drishti, as we are calling it, this whole drama of Bhagwan, you fail to realize that subtlety and the importance of that relationship, and you start questioning even the Lord, that why did Swami do that? Not realizing that the more closer you go to the Lord, the more refined one needs to be. And it is not easy. That's why people would always tell in Perthi environment that being with Bhagavan is like walking on a double-edged sword. Nobody knows. when you can slip, because it is so much alertness. I have had once a small conversation with Brother Radhakrishna, and I was young that time, a small boy, joined recently, and I happened to sit with him, and I was awe to see him, because he lived with Bhagwan. So for me, it was like a demigod. So in my excitement that night, I told him, brother, how lucky you are with Swami all the time. And he just smiled back at me, and I said, brother, what do you talk when you're with Swami? Like you must be having a lot of conversations with Swami, right? So that's a normal, stupid, childlike behavior. And he looked at me and he said, yes, it is very nice when we are in the same room for weeks together and nobody speaks. And he just made one statement, and that was like, I was like, what? You're in a room and you don't have a conversation? So what we think from outside, that being with Bhagwan means a continuous 24/7 interview, fun, frolics. No, it's business. Because when you're close to the Lord, your whole expectations are also very high. So when you look at this, when you're talking about the Sukshma Buddhi, I'm just reminded of Bhagwan from that perspective, like how he expects each one of us to pick it up, to understand life better, to understand the approach towards God, failing which it will be our loss, because he has given us the golden opportunity on a diamond plate, if I may say. And to live up to that expectation is not easy. What do you say?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. In fact, the Swami says that only in the silence you hear the footsteps of the Lord. It is only that when we get closer and closer to the formless aspect of the divinity, we tend to be more and more silent. I am reminded of this. This incident comes to my mind where the famous singer Raja Reddy Garu, he was, that is the time when transition is happening from him to the students for bhajans, and usually he would be the one who would start. The mic was in front of him, and he would start with Om. The bhajans would start with him starting saying the Om. And how would that happen? Prior to starting Om, he would actually close his eyes and meditate. And the meditation would be for 15 minutes, and the mic is placed in front of him, and then he would start Om. That's the usual practice. That day, Swami wanted the change. Swami wanted the voice to start Om, and it was not his turn. Now, since he was in meditation, this was not communicated to him physically, and there is no mic in front of him. While the mic was taken away from him and it was placed in front of the boy who was supposed to be chanting his Om, and there is that busy, that air of uncertainty as to at that exact hour, exact minute, our Raja Reddy Garu would start off Om. Now there would be two Oms in front of Swami, because physically this was not communicated to him, and the boys were, that air of uncertainty was there as to how would Swami not kind of treat this entire situation. Swami was keenly looking at both of them, and Swami also kind of very beautifully, he wanted us, I think, the students to learn, everybody to learn a lesson. He also kind of instructs not to tell him, and the boys were hesitantly waiting, and the hour strikes at 5 and they're supposed to start home, but to everyone's surprise, Raja Reddy Garu continues to close his eyes and he does not chant Om. And there's a beautiful smile on his lips. While the other brother starts off with Om. There is only one Om which was started off. There is no communication given. And there is only beautiful smile playing on this meditative face of Raja Reddy Garu. And the bhajan starts off. And Swami, there was so much of pride in Swami's eyes that till then people are feeling sorry that this opportunity has actually moved away from Raja Reddy Garu to someone else. But that minute they realized, no, actually Swami is in the eyes of the world, the opportunity moved away. But in the eyes of the Lord, he was taken to a little higher pedestal of understanding the Lord without any words. And he opens his eyes, he nods to Swami, and Swami nods to him. That is all. No words were spoken, but everything was understood. I think as we get closer and closer to the Lord, you realize that there's nothing that needs to be spoken. And similar, I think, is the case with probably was the case with Ravana. No, he knew the designs of the divine. He knew as to how life should be led in such a way that it attracts divinity. In fact, yesterday we were in the radio Sai session. One very interesting conversation comes up of Krishna, where Jarasandha attacks Krishna 17 times, and the 16th time Balrama catches hold of Jarasandha. No, his chariot is broken, the axle is broken. Balrama catches hold of Jarasandha by his hair and the collar, and he tells Krishna that allow me to kill this fool. That he has been troubling Mathura for 16 times now. Just one punch, Krishna, I would kill him. And Krishna tells him, no, 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 don't kill him. He says, wait, wait, don't kill him. He says, why? You let him lose now. He says, why are you gone out of your mind? He has troubled us 16 times now. We got him. Krishna tells him, no, no, just let him go. So he leaves and this man runs away. After that, they have a conversation in which Krishna tells him, there are some more idiots, some more men of evil characteristics that they'll be attracted by Jarasandha. So there'll be one more time war where all these people will come to Jarasandha. Jarasandha is the magnet who is attracting all those evil personages to him. So he'll come along with those evil personages to us, and then we will tackle all those people, and we will kill Jarasandha whenever the time is right with using someone else. And that's how it happens. Then he goes and gets all his generals who have been from the Nishada kingdom, and all of them get eliminated. And Krishna tells this phrase is in fact is found in end part of Mahabharata, where he tells Arjuna that Arjuna, you think the war for you began only on the first day of 18 days? No, no. I have begun this war much before you, much before you. I've been preparing this ground. He says, I have been eliminating people who are of much stronger than all these people put together. And he gives names of three people. He says, I have killed Shishupala, I have killed Jarasandha, I have kind of decapitated our man Ekalavya. Had these three joined together with Kauravas, this war would have been an extremely difficult task for you all to win. He says, I've been doing this much before even you have realized. So if you look at Ravana, I think similar is the role played by Ravana. He has become there's a beautiful Telugu poem, he says, where I have become the pillar of the pride of Rakshasa clan, that I am like that sun, and along me are all the planets of Rakshasa kingdoms revolving around me. It is like my gravitation, it is like my attraction, which is holding all those kingdoms together. And I think he was doing it intentionally. He was actually drawing all those snakes that were hidden in the holes outside, so that the massive Garuda called Rama can just finish them off in one go.
If you really look at Ravan in your same parlance, what you have just mentioned, Ravan's story is also similar because, as I was mentioning, he lived for such a long years, and he was very sure that now his time has come, so to say, of liberation. So that's why when you look at Ramayana as a story, then you can look at a story of how lust, greed, envy can be destroyed and will be destroyed by positive forces like Ram. But from an Adhyatmic point of view, when you look at it, and as we are talking about the role, a negative role being played by Ravan, then you realize in the whole divine drama, everybody was playing their role with perfection and to facilitate that message of Avatar. So the world at large can benefit. Now look at the grace, if you look at it from that same perspective, Ravan attracted Ram towards him by negativity, and then he brought all the possible Rakshasas from Patal Lok, from other lokas to come and get killed. And like Krishna said that I have destroyed XYZ before the war itself, imagine a situation in Ramayana when you have Kumbhakaran, Meghnad, Ravan, Ahiravan, all of these players fighting together in the battle. what would have happened the battleship. Whereas in the
Absolutely.
Ramayana, if you really consider it from a very subtle eyes, then you realize that from Rama's side, everybody was fighting. Hanuman, Ma- all that. If you look at Sugriev's full army and Marich, and sorry, there's
Jer-
what is his name? Huh?
Jambavan. Jambavan.
Jambavant, Marich, yeah, sorry, Jambavant, Hanuman, Sugriv, or a
All
whole contingent was fighting from Rama's
the
side.
bears and
But from
monkeys.
Ravan's side, he was sending one person.
Absolutely.
Okay, go. Meghnad, go first. Kumbhakaran, go next. Ahiravan, go next. So he was sending one and get killed. I'm just using the term get killed. But look at when everybody got finished, then he comes.
Yes.
So we look at the war, but look at how it is divinely constructed and how subtly Ravan has played a role like that. And that is probably, I feel, from a very logical perspective, you do not find malice in anyone. Even Sugriv, Ram obviously was beyond malice, but nobody has anything. Even Lakshman, who had little bit, Ram even destroys that at the end and he says, go and pay your homage to Ravan. Fall at his feet and pray for the final knowledge from Ravan. And Ravan also, in a magnanimous way, gives him the secret of governance and courts. So imagine what Ramayana is all about. Everybody was, God realized, everybody was dharmic, even the Rakshasas were dharmic, and yet they were happy to play the roles given to them. And
Absolutely,
some were
brother.
conscious, some were, most of them were conscious, some were not conscious of the roles they're playing. But the beauty of Ravan especially comes alive to me as we have depicted Ravan in a very negative light. So let us look at the contributions of Ravan, Raju, and I would like you to take through the
Yes.
journey. What Ravan has given us. These are all known facts. Ravan was a great musician, we know it. He created an instrument which is called Ravan Hatha. This instrument is still in some form available in the Rajasthan area of India, and it's a string instrument. In Shiv Puran, it is also mentioned that there was once an ice age when the whole earth was covered in ice. Everything was like whole vegetation, everything was gone. And some rishis who survived this pralay in a way went to Lord Shiva and prayed that, Lord, we have lost everything. So Lord Shiva says, as long as Vedas are alive, life will continue. So they said, but Master, looks like Veda also is lost. There is nobody. Then Lord Shiva tells him at that time that no, Ravan is still there and he has it. So Ravan had already memorized. Obviously, we know it's a Shruti. So in the memory of Ravan, all the Vedas were there. So they say as a musician, Ravan sings the Veda out. And that is how the rishis again relearn it and the process continues. So Ravan as a musician is a great. And there is also a story which tells that there was a Veena, Rudra Veena, right, Raju?
Yes, brother. In
Created
fact,
by Lord
I was
Shiva.
I was speaking to
Yeah,
our
yeah,
music college brothers. They were mentioning
yeah.
that the credit of Rudravina can be given directly to Ravana, even though it was created by Shiva. But actually, it seems it was the Ravana style
Who
of
played it?
playing. Yes,
Yeah, who actually played and you can say popularized it, and it was made by Lord Shiva, no doubt. But Ravana was one who could imagine playing instrument created by Lord. You require a different level to be there, right? And Rudra Veena, it seems, is very complicated. It is not a simple Veena to play. It is hard. It has got different string system. I don't know. I'm not a musician, but what I hear is it's not an easy instrument to play, and he was master of that, obviously. So you can imagine the caliber of Ravan was that as a musician. Asceticism, we know that Ravan has done many penances in his lifetime, but the famous one was when he, you know, meditates for Shiva for immortality boon. When all the three brothers go in the Mount Gokarn and meditate for 11,000 years. Now, people can talk in different languages about the years part of it, but as we know, Ravan, the chronology which explains that he lived for such a long time, then 11,000 years doesn't seem that bad. So that was. So, Raji, if you remember anything of that nature, you can please share on this.
Yes,
And
brother. In
Ravan
fact,
wrote a lot of. Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
on.
on. Now, I was just saying, talking about this meditation, this ascetism. Look at, apart from the tapas that he does, his there is that movie in which, in fact, when it was shown to Swami along with the boys, Swami was also thrilled. Swami had the words of praise for Ravana. He he lifts that entire Kailash, and he realizes that it is too heavy, and he starts getting crushed. And in that extreme agony, people say that the doctors of psychology, they keep saying that only under stress your real worth, your real character comes out. Imagine the entire Kailash is on your back, it is crushing you to the ground. And that is when he sings the famous stuti of Nataraja, the Shiva
Shivtanda
Stotram,
Stotram.
Shivtandava Stotram. Imagine the lyrical beauty of it. In that extreme, intense situation comes out this beautiful composition as Ashu. It just flows out of Ravana. And even then, Shiva does not appear. Probably Shiva wanted to show how great was Ravana's devotion. That is when Ravana pulls out his intestines and he strings them as the veena. And even then, Shiva does not appear. And as the last attempt, he cuts his head and offers them to Shiva. And that is when the Lord comes down. It is This life is also an example that even such great devotees, such great ascetic
Can fall.
personality can fall.
Like Bhagavan gives an example that in a boat, if there is even a small hole, that can become the reason for the whole ship to drown. So
Absolutely.
when you see a negativity, you must close that hole. So it's a very strange learning lesson from Ravan. Okay, Ravan wrote next was Ravan Proktobala Chikitsa Sutra. It is actually on the treatment of children. It's a complete sutra. It is a Kriya Kalaguntara Tantra. It's a tantric treatment of children. And this was actually a dialogue which was given, and it deals with all the diseases relating to child. It's compiled as a Ravan Kumar Tantra. Okay. And Ravan was also the master of Arthashastra. Arthashastra is supposed to be given to us by Guru Shukracharya, who was the guru of Rakshas clan, and Ravan mastered that Arthashastra also. Ravan Samhita. I don't know how many of us know that Ravan was a genius astrologer. It was actually, they say, it is narrated by Shiva to him, and he wrote it down, and the whole concept of Hindu astrology. I'm sure people must know this, that when Ravan was so like accomplished, that when he got to know that okay, the lives are governed by these navagrahas, and because of their planetary disposition, you can forecast one's life and how your life gets governed because of them. He reversed the order. He said, if I'm born under that situation and they can control me, so he controlled all of the navagrahas. So, as the scriptures tell us, that he had actually imprisoned navagrahas in his palace. So they were all locked in. He controlled them. Even Yama was its footstool. That's how they describe, they depict Ravana as so powerful that he kept the Yama under his feet. So that was, he in fact overpowered death, he overpowered the Grahas, and all of them were helped by Hanuman. So Hanuman becomes an antidote, which we'll see later on as we move in the Ramayana. We see how Hanuman's role is so critical and important when we deal with Kali Yuga per se. So Ravan Samhita is a very beautiful compilation of book on astrology. Raj, you want to add anything here?
I would only say that one of the conversations, Swami was saying that he is an example of what a human mind can achieve. No, the brother was mentioning about one of the brothers was innocently mentioning about Ketu Dasha in his astrology. He's going through quite tough times, and then Swami gives the example that this Ravana, he grew up to be such a powerful entity just by sheer tapas, that he controlled those nine navagrahas. So our brother tells Swami that, Swami, I'm going through this Ketu Dasha as per my grandfather, so I need your grace. Swami says, you don't need my grace for this. Says, your mind is so powerful. And Swami gave the example of Ravana. This fellow was able to control. I'm sorry to use the word fellow, but our man Ravana was able to control all the nine grahas with the sheer power of his penance. And in fact, on one of the occasions, Swami revealed that all that you see, the divine play that you talk about, the divinity aspect of divinity of mind that you talk about, is just 1% of what my real divinity is. He said it's like a small fly going and sitting on Sai Gita's tail. And then the boys continued that, Swami, after this, Swami puts his hand on the door and he asked them to push. The boys were trying to push. He was just putting his finger on the door and the boys were trying to push. The door would not budge even a centimeter. And the boys give up finally and they, Swami, you are God. I said, no, this is not godly prowess. This is not divine prowess. This is absolute purity and that penance, that purity and penance. And Swami is showing, we have seen it through the life of our Lord. But when you look at Ravana, I think it was his penance that got him these achievements. He was able to control these nine grahas, and in fact, to an extent, he was the only one in the entire scriptural. If you look at the scriptural characters, only one to have got the Atmalingam of Shiva. It's like
Yeah.
Swami says that he was the only one to extract that Atmalingam even from Lord. It's like literally you are extracting the essence of Shiva in a very mundane sense, and he could carry it
There is
within.
Raju, there is also a description, a depiction about Ravan's first encounter with Lord Shiva. In Puran, they write, so beautifully dramatized, that Ravan does penance to please Shiva for powers and immortality. And when Shiva is pleased and he appears before Ravan, see, as we discussed, that Ravan had both elements of a rishi and as well as Rakshasi. He had the combination of both. So his penance was because of the Rakshasi element, that he wanted to get immortality. But he had a big chunk of Rishi in him. So when he finishes the penance and Shiva is pleased and he appears before him, the explanation is that Ravan looks at Lord and he's awestruck. He is so much in awe of the beauty of Lord Shiv that he forgets why was he doing penance. He loses all the sense of body consciousness. He loses desire to ask anything, and he just falls in love with the Lord. And that is where he says, Lord, I want nothing but you. And he gets stuck like a child, that I want you. And Shiva gets so happy by his change of heart that Lord Shiva gives him that the khadak, that Chandrahas,
Yes,
his weapon he gives him as a gift. And he's not even cared about that because he was in so much in love with him. And when Lord leaves, then his desire is that if my Lord is still available physically, then I must catch him physically also. And that is how he travels from Lanka. He goes up to Himalayas to Kailash. And that is the story of later on how he tries to lift the Lanka. All that happens. So imagine the Ravan, even though we are scared that he's doing penance for something wrong, but he had that kind of positivity in him to receive, to accept the Lord and fall in love with him. So that is the beauty of Ravan. The depiction is amazing. how it goes. Okay, let's look at it, Raju. Let's look at more of what he
Yes.
has given to us. Ark Prakasham. This is a book on Siddha medicines and to cure illness using mixture of herbs and chemicals. This, it seems, is captured as a dialogue between Mandodari, his wife, and Ravan, where he's talking to her about different uh, cure methods and everything, and which medicine herb to use for what. So this is Prakasham. He is also known to be famous in Nadi Shastra. Nadi is actually veins. I'm sure people who know Nadis, uh, in traditionally our doctors, our Ved, whom we call, they could catch our vein and tell you the whole uh, situation, physical condition of a being. So Nadi Vigyan, the knowledge of veins, was Ravan was expert in that too. So he had written Nadi Prakash, Pariksha, and Nadi Vigyan. So this is another lovely description of this. Ravan Bhit. This is a Vedic text on the phonetics of Telugu language. Ravan Bhashya. This is a Sankhya scripture. Ravan was known to be a proponent of Sankhya philosophy, and he even wrote his own commentary, which is called Ravan Bhashya. Katindi is a Vaishishika scripture. It is another philosophy which Ravan propounded. Shaivite, obviously, we know that he was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and Brother Raju just mentioned about the composer of Shiva Tandav Stotram. Uh, Prakrita Kamadhenu. This is a grammatical text on Prakriti language. Now, we know that in India we had many languages starting from Brahmani. So they are the most ancient texts. And imagine being a grammatical expert on Prakriti language. Just to give a little, idea about the context to people, Raju. English phonetics, English language has 26 alphabets. Okay. I think Hindi has, I should have counted exactly, if people can Google it also. Hindi has around 65, 70 alphabets. Sanskrit is supposed to have around 120 or odd alphabets. So, and there is the way I come from, I'm Kashmiri, and we use the script. Our, unfortunately, is a dying script now. It is called Sharda Lipi. The Lipi, the script, like in English, we write Roman script, and the language written on Roman script is many. Even Spanish and English and all that is written on Roman script. And today, even Hindi, we are trying to write in Roman. That's unfortunate. Uh, so we used to use a script called Sharda Lipi. Sharda is almost, it's actually they say mother of Sanskrit also, because it was Sharda is the mother goddess herself, the Saraswati mother's name is Sharda. So Brahmani Lipi, then came Sharda Lipi, and then everything else. So it's a huge. Now compare 26 alphabets to 120 plus alphabets. So imagine a language which can capture every sound a human being can create. So, for example, Raju, I'm sure it'll be interesting. I'm sure you can give examples from Telugu and other languages. I'll give you an example from Kashmiri language. Like every sound, like ts, is a word in Kashmiri, and that can be written in Sharda Lipi. So, which means our script is so advanced that any sound created can be written. And the beauty of that writing is that anybody reading that script who knows how to read the script will read it in the same manner. So it is not like the Roman script that you write and I can't read the same way as you write. Everybody reads it in a different way. But here is our script in India. All the scripts, in fact, we have so many from
Absolutely.
south to north, that what we write, we read. And can you imagine the advancement of our script, that every sound created from the stomach to the tip of our lips, every sound which originates has a letter, a phonetically written letter, which can be written
Exactly.
and reread in the same manner. That is the beauty and the power of our language. And most of our languages used Bijakshara mantras as our phonetical letter. So it was not just any random ABC. It was that anga. So it goes in a very orderly manner. The sound captured from each of our chords, the body system, and they are all related to Bijakshari mantras. So focusing on any sound will lead you to the origin of the sound. So our phonetic system was very scientific, very spiritual. So even by learning the language, we could have realized God.
Absolutely.
By
And
practicing the
Ravana,
sound
yes, Ravana was an expert in the language. He could,
in
as
languages.
in language, in the usage of words. In fact, Swami mentions that if you have to take two characters as exemplary characters as to how words can be used as weapons to inspire or to punish. Those are two are one is Hanuman, second is Ravana. And Swami in fact emphasizes more on Ravana. Now, he was able to use words in such a way that he would instigate anyone with fear or with subordination. When Maricha tells Ravana that I will not go as the golden deer, Ravana does not slap him, Ravana does not throw him. He just threatens him with his tone. And Valmiki writes beautifully that Ravana changes the tenor of his tone, and Maricha gets the message that you will not live long. Be careful. All that he said was just emphasize some words, and Maricha got the lesson. Even when Hanuman was sitting in front of Hanuman, who was, Swami very beautifully writes, and if we read it very carefully, looking at the way in which Rakshasa force were coming one after another, Hanuman wanted to look at the Ravana, that person who is actually inspiring all those Rakshas to go and offer themselves to death. So that is when he decided that I should go and meet this man who is sending this king who is sending these enemies one after another. And even Hanuman, such a Hanuman as he has one of the characteristic of Hanuman is complete control over his emotions. Even such a Hanuman gets enraged by Ravana. Ravana and Hanuman becomes so furious that he actually twirls his entire tail and he makes it equivalent to Ravana's side and he sits on it and starts. The Rajasic nature of Hanuman. I mean, Ravana is able to extract it only through words, and he uses in such a way that if you read carefully the Valmiki Ramayana, no, it actually does not insult Rama. He is conveying what he wants to convey, but yet it sounds like as if he's insulting Rama. He says that man who is staying in forest, which is not wrong, but the way in which he says is a complete insult to Rama's character. He says that man who is a beggar, who does not have even a cloth to wear, which is true, which was true with Rama, that he did not have anything to wear. But the way in which he says actually implies something else, as if he is implying a beggar, he is implying an impoverished man, a kid, in fact. And when it comes to Vibhishana, Swami says Vibhishana was so stubborn that he was the only fellow who was not moved by words of Ravana. That is when Ravana gets into action of kicking, literally kicking Vibhishana out of the court. And such was the character of Ravana that he knew what to use, when to use, and where to use. And I think it would not be proper on our part to even to assume that such a Ravana, who was able to control Navagrahas, who was able to control so many generals of Rakshasas, was enraged by the mere rants of his sister Shurpanaka. It was just an excuse, I think. He knew that, yeah, my time has come. I have to
Time
get
has
this
come.
play to an end. Right. And he just uses Shurpanaka as an excuse. And the Telugu Vishwanath Satyanarayana, he writes the Ramayana. His interpretation was the first conversation between Shurpanaka and Ravana was Shurpanaka just comes and she talks about the beauty of Rama, like how beautiful, how great was Rama, how beautiful was his demeanor, and how fantastic was his touch. And that is when Ravana realizes that actually the plot is going away from the plan, from the script. So he starts encouraging Shurpanakha, saying that, hey, what is this? Such a beautiful lady you are. What is it that your ears are gone? Who is that who has cut your ears? Who is it that who has cut the nose of such a great lady, such a powerful lady? Tell me. And they're like, how can those cockroaches touch this beautiful, effulgent lady called Shurpanakha? And indirectly, he enrages her rage, and she kinds of falls prey, and that is when she starts her rant, complains to everybody, saying that these two brothers were the cause. Go and update their wife, etc.
Bhagwan talks about Ravan in a multiple manner, and as we are discussing that, we can look at Ramayana from different aspects. Even if you look at it from a very bhautik, as we say, the worldly eyes, still there is so much to learn from Ramayana. Right, everything like a caliber of Ravan, who gave us so much from astrology, astronomy, war, governance, and music, and everything. Imagine how he deteriorates, and Bhagwan has very beautifully explained from a physical perspective that Ravan had so many virtues, but it was all nullified by one main virtue, negativity, and that was lust. So Ravan, in the end, actually got personified with that one wrong character, which Bhagwan gives a very beautiful analogy. It's like even if you have a gallons of healthy good milk, and a drop of poison can turn the whole thing a useless and poisonous. So similarly for Ravan, with so much goodness, with so much of good contribution, when he allowed one vices of lust to dominate his thinking, to dominate his character, that ruined the whole persona of Ravan. So look
Absolutely.
at how Bhagwan can take a story, and that's why it is not a matter of what should I say, an envious look at Ravan. It is like a pity look at Ravan. And that too, when we look at it from the same perspective and try to understand our lives, we realize that all of us are in a way going through the Ravan stage. you know
Absolutely.
we allow negativity to take over, and one negativity is enough, and here we personify negativities at galore. So imagine a personage of Ravan caliber with one vice ruined his life. Imagine how much care we need to give to avoid that drastic situation. So, and how beautifully Bhagwan has explained this part of Ravan.
And
You remember
Darshan,
Ravi
one of
Swami? Yeah, please go on.
yes. No, I just coming to adding to another aspect of what Swami mentions about Ravana. In Darshan sessions, one of the brothers was, if you recollect, there was a thick accounting book for 12th class.
Yes,
Yeah, so he was carrying that book, and in fact he was carrying two of such similar books,
Radha
and he was
Swami and
keeping, yes. So he was keeping one above the other, and then Swami is passing in front, and Swami looks at both the books. He says, "Ah, so much to study, all indigestion, anta indigestion," and Swami walked away. So what Swami was, the divine teacher, the master, he was meaning that any information that is not put into practice is actually an overload. It creates an indigestion and confusion, and it also leads to ego. That in fact was also personified by Ravana studied 64 scriptures, but our Sri Rama studied just half of what Ravana studied, but Sri
64
Rama
forms
perfected
of
all those
knowledge. 64 forms of knowledge.
forms of knowledge. Yes, sorry, yeah, 64 forms of knowledge, while Rama was master for just 32 forms of knowledge. And Ravana unfortunately had only them at the insight level. Swami uses that beautiful analogy where Swami says it is, if you skill, you have that, you have to balance the skill, otherwise it will be a kill. When you balance the skill, you have the insight. And Swami gives the example of Rama. He says skill, balance, and insight. Rama had the complete balance of what the life of the world should be and what a virtuous and noble life should be like. Unlike Ravana, who was a man of immense indigestion, as Swami calls him. And in one of the interactions, one of the brothers was playing the character of Ravana. You know, he was he was supposed to deliver a dialogue. While delivering a dialogue, he uses his left hand. He used his left hand on the stage. This was practice overseen by Swami. He was using his left hand on the stage to worship Shiva. And Swami took note of it. After the drama, after the practice gets over, Swami gives feedback. Swami says, Ravana was so particular that even though he was so well read in scriptures, he was also quite orthodox in his ways. He was very particular not to use his left hand for worshipping Shiva. It seems he would only use his right hand and right foot. And in fact, just to recollect another interaction, uh, days later in Kodai, so one of the brothers wanted some special gift from Swami as a token of his love, of recognizing his love for Swami. So he was silently and intently praying. So you mentioned of that linga of Shiva, which was given by Ravan, which was given to Ravana. So Swami comes down the Kodai steps, and he looks at this boy and waves. And then comes out a massive one not a mala, a massive mala of 108 lingas, huge. And Swami just throws it in his hands. And as Swami throws it, it was quite hot. This brother was not able to hold because it's quite hot. He was just trying to move it from one hand to another. And since Swami gave that mala, did not want to put it down. So he was trying to juggle it. And Swami by then walks and sits in the throne. And then Swami looks at him and says, how is that mala? This boy comes running. Swami says, Swami, it is very hot, Swami. Swami says, this is tapas Shakti. So Swami is giving that step up description. He is building up, and we were anticipating probably this must be of Lord Shiva himself, or some of the great sages or saints who have pleased Shiva and got this gift. Swami said, it is a result of great penance. And this brother was, he was very happy that Swami at last recognized his love to Swami. And you can actually make out that widened eyes, that the way he looks at others, saying that, Look at me, I'm so special. Swami gifted me this linga, this mala of lingas." And then the conversation goes in. Swami then beautifully, mischievously, Swami says, "Do you know who is this? Do you want to wear?" And this brother, "Yes, yes, Swami. If you tell me, I will wear." And Swami is dramatically building up, and this brother gets revealed. Swami tells him, "Do you know whose mala is this?" He says, "No, Swami, it is Ravana's." The minute Swami mentions Ravana's, the entire expression of this brother changes, and he wanted to drop it. And since Swami gave, he was very hesitant to drop it on the floor. He just looked at Swami, almost giving it to Swami, saying that I don't want. I don't want to wear it. I don't want to be like Ravana. Please take it back. And Swami just takes that mala and throws it, and it disappears. This was the Lord who using any object could drive a lesson. And then when Swami threw that mala of linga, Swami told an important lesson. He said, even 108 lingas that were given by Shiva could not could not protect Ravana from death, because he had those vices inside, while this mala of lingas are outside. What is inside is more valuable. That leads your destiny.
Can you imagine such people have walked this earth? It's not a joke.
Absolutely.
There is a Shiva Jyotirling, Badrinath Dham, they call it. It is in the Bihar area. And the stories of that same Atmalinga when Shiva gives him, and Ravan is walking from Lanka, sorry, from Himalaya to Lanka. On the way, the drama of Ganesh playing the trick
Yes.
and Ganga entering Ravan, and he has to go for passing the urine. And that time, the ling gets kept on the ground. And Shiva had given him the blessing that you can take it, but wherever you keep the lingam, it will be installed there. Then you can't move it. So Ravan, when he comes back, he finds a lingam on the ground and he's enraged, obviously, and he tries to remove the lingam and he can't. He could not remove it. It was so much like as will of God. He could not. So in the anger, what Ravan does, he pushes the lingam down in earth because it was out. So he gets angry that because he can't take the lingam, he pushes it down, and that is why it's the only lingam in Dasha in Bara in 12 Jyotirlingams
Jyotirlinga.
where you only see the tip of the ling. If you go to Vaidyanath Dham, you will see that the Vaidyanath Dham lingam is only the top portion of the lingam is visible because Ravan pushed it down completely. So
Okay.
people only can like in most of the lingam you can see the full lingam right in front of you, right? But in Vaidyanath Dham, the only tip of the lingam is visible because
This
Ravan pushed it down.
this I
So
think
that
is a characteristics of Ravan, brother. That what I
yeah,
like is mine. What I don't like, nobody should have.
no, you should. I think that is Rakshasa's tendency, right?
Yes, Rakshasa tendency.
Yeah, if I can't have it, you can't have it. It's like
Absolutely.
that is Rakshasa's ability to do that. So yeah, it's another beauty of that. And that is why they say no that all these depictions when you read Ramayana, we saw that how four brothers Ram, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughan they represented the four Vedas. Similarly, Bhagavan says these three brothers Vibhishan, Ravan, and Kumbhakaran represented the three gunas.
Absolutely.
So Vibhishan represented the Sattva guna, Ravan the Rajogun, and Kumbhakaran the Tamogun. He represented that way. So imagine
Yes, brother.
the
Just contrast it with contrasting the similar Jyotir Vaidyanath experience where our man Ravana pushes the linga down to earth because he can't have it, so nobody else can have it. Contrast it with what happened to Vibhishana. After the coronation, Rama gives him the statue of Sri Ram, of Vishnu reclining on the serpent, which was given by Brahma to Dashratha as a reward for fighting for Devatas. Now Rama tells him clearly that this statue cannot touch the ground, and wherever it touches, it gets installed. So they were drawing it on the logs, and when it reaches the midpoint of exactly the midpoint of Rama's Ayodhya and Ravana's Lanka or Vibhishana's Lanka, the logs break away, and then the statue touches the ground. Vibhishana tries to pull it and he realizes that it touched the ground. Unlike Ravana, who pushes the linga down, Vibhishana constructs a great temple. That's how the temple of Srirangam has come. The Srirangam is in fact is given by Vibhishana to the world. Now compare it, and he praises. He writes an entire eulogy of how great Vishnu is, how great the statue is, and he says, "Let anyone, everyone can come and worship this statue of Shiva, the blessing of Rama, and the token of friendship of Rama with Vibhishana." And on the other side is our hero Ravana. Since he has lost Lingam, he is enraged. He pushes it down, and he actually wants to hide it. He wants to hide it from the world. He's so enraged that you are not coming with me, so I'll not let you be worshipped. But Ganga washes the top, and then he becomes visible, and he is prayed by the world. The Sattvic Guna, Rajoguna, and other extreme is our Kumbhakarna, Tamoguna, complete. In fact, one of the one funny incident comes to my mind. Uh, so the first batch of brothers, the second batch of brothers who had gone to Kodai with Swami, there was one brother who was quite fat and who used to eat very, uh, I mean, very huge quantities of food. I mean, extreme quantities of food. He used to eat very often and very much. So, and added to this, he had the habit of snoring. You know how all of us stay in Kodai. Just on the other side of the door is Swami, and outside the door all the boys sleep. So this is the second year. This is the first year, in fact, when the Sai Shruti got inaugurated and boys are getting to stay with Swami. The door is not properly padded. You can imagine it's not. Uh, we are all of us are learning it on the go as to what is Swami's requirement. And this brother had his stomach full, probably two times of what others brothers had. He had his meal to his stomach full. He came and he puts both his hands under his head and he sleeps and he begins to snore so loudly that on the other end, on the other side of the door, the Swami, it was quite loud. So the brother who was assisting Swami came out and said, asked him, just wake him up, push him up and wake him up. He's too loud. The brother would not get up. So others push him, others, trying to call out his name. And you know how hushed we would be, like, "Shh, that hush, hush, get up, get up, get up. You can't be loud because Swami is just next door." And as this was going on, Swami came out and Swami was standing and watching this entire scene. And they were pushing this brother. They were trying to, literally, they were trying to, kind of pin his feet, pin the soles, or trying to twitch his fingers, just so that he would get up. And Swami is standing there with his hands folded and looking at the entire two, three of these small kittens, or rather small brothers in size, playing with that massive size. Swami, and suddenly he's jolted that he realizes Swami, because the entire hall has fallen silent. He realized subconsciously that Swami must be there. He got up startled, and he looked at Swami and did like this, namaskar. And Swami tells him, hey, Emira, what, you slept like Kumbhakarna? And all of those four of them were trying to wake you up like those Rakshasas who were trying to wake up Kumbhakarna. That Kumbhakarna at least got up when his name was called out two, three times. But this Kumbhakarna is not getting up till I came. And that was the tamasic nature of Kumbhakarna, personification of tamasic nature. Eat and sleep, food and rest.
Wow, no. I would say somebody should compile the humors with Avatar. That would be an excellent book.
Absolutely.
The humorous aspect of Bhagwan and how he could. Can you imagine walking out at night and to wake up a boy who's snoring? So it is a sweet memories. Now you have reminded of another beautiful story about Ravan. I know people know that before Ram uh, made the bridge over the ocean, uh, elders suggested Ram that he should invoke Shiva's blessings and they should do proper Shiva Aradhana. So Ram makes a huge lingam, but they say that if we are to do it properly, then we need a Brahmin. And now there was no Brahmin in that vicinity, and to bring a Brahmin from Ayodhya would have taken time. So they were saying how to do it, who is that? And Jamvant or somebody suggested, it's very strange that we have a Brahmin very close to us, but it's a matter of convincing him to come. Then Ram says, who is that Brahmin? And they say it is Ravan. So he says, Ravan is a Brahmin who knows this full process and he'll be the best priest for this prayer. And mind you that this puja was done to invoke the blessing of Shiva to get success in the war with Ravan. So in a way, you are doing a puja to kill Ravan. Okay, so that is the backdrop. And but people say to Ram that, hey Ram, how do you think Ravan would, agree? And I recall because you said that that language, the art of speech, was with Hanuman and Ravan. So you gave an example of the art of Ravan, who enraged Hanuman. And here Hanuman is given the responsibility, or Hanuman accepts the responsibility to convince Ravan to come and be the propitiating priest for this puja. So can you imagine Hanuman going to Lanka to invite Ravan, to request Ravan to come and be the priest. And I wish I could hear what Hanuman must have said and how Sri Hanuman must have convinced Ravan by invoking his goodness or whatever. And he puts him in a spot that Ravan, according to his knowledge and being a Brahmin, he says it will be improper and sinful for a Brahmin to accept such an invitation. So Hanuman puts the whole thing in such a way that now to refuse the offer was against the norm of being a Brahmin. So when Ravan realizes that, he accepts the offer to come and propitiate. But when Ravan comes, this story is told in many places, but I'm just going to add a flavor which Bhagwan has given as indication, but it is not written, so just take it with a pinch of salt. That Ravan comes, and when he organizes the things, everybody is actually surprised and shocked also that how did Ravan accept to come first of all. But Ravan being Ravan and Ram being Ram, both acknowledge and he comes. And Ravan lays down the rules of the prayer. And one of the condition Ravan says that since Ram is married, his wife should be in the prayer. Without wife, this puja cannot be performed. This havan, this yajnam will not be fructified. So we need Sita. Now everybody looks at Ravan that, hey Ravan, the mother is with you. And now you are telling us that we should get Sita first. So Ravan then makes, it seems, a statement. He says, since I have accepted to conduct this, perform this puja, this havan, and it is my duty now to see to it that this puja is performed to the best and finds fructification, and hence it is my responsibility to organize for Sita to come. So it seems, as the story goes, Ravan brings Sita for the prayer. And Ram also commits to Ravan that after this session, Sita would go back with Ravan and will be brought back only as the due process. So, but this story has been explained in many ways that since Ravan's insistence, a golden statue of Sita was made. That is where many descriptions they write. But this version is also there that he brings Sita, performs the prayer, puja, Rameshwaram place, and then takes Sita mother back to Lanka. So when you look at this Adhyatmic view of this whole story, I just can't, I can't help but be in awe of the stature of these personalities. That they are not ordinary beings. They fought for their principles, they fought for what they believed in truth, but did not deviate from anything. Can you imagine Ravan himself bringing the mother out and then Ram allowing it to go back? So it is such a mind-boggling thing that even if you narrate it or if you people will had hard time digesting this fact. That was Ravan like that, or was Ram like that? But from a physical perspective, when I look at Ram's character, he never showed animosity, he never showed envy, he never showed any kind of negativity in fighting Ravan. He was also representing pure dharma, that he was following his dharma as a husband, as a king, as an ascetic. He did not fight Ravan for his personal needs alone. It's a very beautiful series when you look at it from that perspective. Ram was doing his role, Ravan was doing his role. And if you take the story only on a physical level that Ram did puja to go there, even that story is fine to convey a beautiful message that how a person in need must cross all the hurdles to reach. even if it means to carry monkeys and animals along with you. Otherwise, imagine Bharat, like his father Dasharath, had the ability to shoot an arrow from Ayodhya and destroy people in Lanka. So Bharat had that caliber. Imagine Ravan just indicating Bharat, okay, come and handle. And Ram himself was nothing less than his father in archery, the art of archery. If Dashrath could close Lanka down from Ayodhya, imagine Ram sitting right in Ayodhya. Couldn't he do it like that? So it is a very different drama. When you look at it, it's full of contradictions. But I find it a very beautiful divine contradictions in which divinity is visible yet not. Like we saw Bhagwan, we saw the divinity in play. We realized he's divine, but at the same time, he created confusion in our head and we started questioning ourselves. We knew on one hand that he knows everything, but then he would ask something and we start explaining as if he does not know and I need to explain to Swami. See, that feeling of that duality is so powerful that it is impossible sometimes to overpower that and remain in that constant integrated awareness that we are with God. And I find that amazing story of Ravan, that he was in a way conscious of Ram and yet he played the role. And from a physical perspective, when you look at from Bhautik visions alone, then you realize that even that caliber of Ravan can fall prey to these vices. So imagine how much we have to be careful about. So what do you say,
Absolutely, well,
Raju?
absolutely. In fact, Ravana's end also, Swami talks about the unfulfilled desires of Ravana. He wanted to convert the entire seawater, saline water, into drinking water. He wanted to
And you
build
have,
stairs to
yeah,
heaven. Yes, and so, but unfortunately, he kept postponing because it is too easy for Ravana, and he wanted to grant immortality. He wanted to give the formula of immortality to everyone. Since it was so easy for Ravana that he could do it anytime, he just kept postponing, procrastination, and he kept postponing it to a later date of time. And finally, when he's lying there on the battleground in the last breaths, he laments. He tells Lakshmana that had I, no, it would not have taken much time. I could have done it like this, but since I took it lightly, now I am here going away without doing. And it tells Lakshmana that never ever postpone a good thought. Swami beautifully describes that scene where Lakshmana goes to Ravana, and this is the first instruction that Ravana gives Lakshmana, that make sure that any good thought that comes to your mind, act upon it immediately. And he gives this example of these three as to how he kept kind of procrastinating them, and then he ended up being as a no one. And even the parting message of Ravana when his life ebbs away, it's a very strange thing that apart from Jatayu, if you look at only other character to whom Rama was physically present for the final rites was Ravana himself, because it's an honor. And Swami talks about a discourse in which Swami says even Dashratha, the one who gave birth to Rama, even he was not blessed with this opportunity of Rama's physical presence for the final rites. But unlike Dashratha, probably Dasharatha was the reason for Rama's physical body, for extracting Rama's that formless god into a form god, into a god of form. But it is Ravana who is in fact the mother of Rama's glory. If there is no Ravana, there is no Rama. Without Ravana's evil tendencies, there is no greatness of Rama. That Swami says that when Rama left, he left as Dasharatha Nandana Rama. But when he returned as Dharma Swarupa Maryada Purushottama Rama. That journey of Dashratha Nandana to Dharma Swarupa to Bhagavan, to Dharma Swarupa Bhagavan Purushottama Ramachandra. That life, if you want to be from someone's son to the embodiment of Dharma, how to be is the example, the exemplary life of Rama. That journey is Rama Ayana, and that journey would not have been possible if there was no Ravana. Like when the way we started, that the balance, as Swami says, the balance. Swami compares those 80 odd generations of Ikshwakus, the clan of Ikshwaku, king after king, with all those good deeds they piled up on the one side, and to balance it on the other side was this selfless, if I have to use the word selfless, Jaya, who took upon himself the role, he donned that negative role and played it so well. Yes, we can kind of criticize Ravana for all his evil tendencies. But we also should be grateful that if there was no Ravana, we would not have had the beautiful, magnanimous, glorious Ramachandra.
True. Ravan should be, in a way, looked at an example of how not to fall prey to negativity. Ravan can be looked at an example of how an illustrious life can be brought down to ruins just by entertaining even a small vice. So, even from a bhautika eyes, from a worldly eyes perspective, we can see that how a small deviation in life can lead to disastrous future. So that is why it is important that, and Bhagavan would say, that constant contemplation in life, the constant introspection in life, that regular mananam is the key for any sadhaka. So the moment we stop doing that introspective processes, we start losing, you know, we won't know when we deviated from the path. And I think that is the greatest lesson I think we can pick up from Ravan's life. That how a glorified life is, you know, to be looked at. Otherwise, Ravan is no longer a negative person, but a person of great stature who played a negative role and who went down negative because of entertaining a vice.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Raju, any final statement before we close for the evening?
I would only say, as Swami once said, uh, Ravana, he exemplified he was a master of Vedas, he was a master of Shastras, he was a master of Puranas, and Swami also says he was a master of Upanishads, he was a master of speech, he was master of Navagrahas, and Swami says, but he was not master of his mind. He played to the tunes of his senses, and because of which he fell. And Swami says that you might be master of all these things, but if you are not master of your mind, if you are not mastered the usage of senses, you will fall like Ravana.
That indigestion thing which we discussed, that I think that is the biggest beautiful example with Bhagwan, that we may acquire knowledge, but if we have not assimilated the knowledge and put into practice, that knowledge will turn into indigestion and it will only stink at the end. And
Absolutely.
Ram was a beautiful example that even if you have, like, Bhagwan would say, one spoon of cow's milk is more important than a barrel of donkey's milk. So Ram was exemplifying that one spoon of pure milk, which he took it, assimilated, and digested. And that is why Ram found fulfillment in a physical level. And Ravan, in spite of having a huge knowledge base, was still not satisfied and fulfilled. Excellent. So thank you, brother, for this wonderful evening in satsang, and I hope and pray that Bhagwan, all our viewers have enjoyed it too. Please continue to send us your feedback. Your positive feedbacks and suggestions do help us in preparing better. And as Swami is guiding us, we'll continue to share this journey. Thank you very much. Sai Ram to all of you. Sai Ram,
Sai Ram.
Raju.
Sai Ram.